Welcome to Room 101 at Harrigan Compound West. It's story time. So this week I'm back to trying Virginia Perique blends again, this time in the form of Peter Stokkebye's Luxury Navy Flake. I don't know what makes it a luxury flake. I don't know if there's a standard Navy Flake out there and this is the luxurious version, nor what luxury would mean in this context. But hey, what the hell? Giving it a shot. And I've been working on this bowl for about a half an hour or so. So far, so good, right? It starts off kind of grassy. And then little by little, citrus notes come dancing on in. I have to admit, this is not my cup of tea usually, but so far it's pretty good. Anyway, I was thinking today about jobs I've once had and why I had them. And I'm of that generation, I guess, that was never impressed with having a job. It just never seemed to be that good an idea to me. My mother, on the other hand, and I've mentioned her before, I am the only child of an Italian mother. She liked jobs, which is a little strange given how few of them she had in her life, but she was quite convinced that I needed to have a job. And she sent me out the house one day when I was 16, and she said, "Don't you come back here until you can make a full-time wage." And I said, okay, but I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. And she said, "Go to the grocery store and apply there." So dutifully, I went to the grocery store and sat on that little bench they have where the guy in the cube talks to you when he's ready. And he said, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, you can hire me." And he said, "Fill this out." And I'm sitting there filling out the job application. And some guy comes and sits next to me, which is already not really how I wanted the day to go. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, if you would just look, you could probably figure it out. I'm applying for a job." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because my mother's up on my back to go get a job." He said, "Oh, well, do you really want to work at a grocery store?" And I said, "I actually don't want to work anywhere. But in all the places I don't want to work, grocery stores seem to top the list." And he said, "Give the guy back the application. Come with me." I said, "I don't know." It was that whole strangers in cars thing. And he said, "No, trust me, it'll be all right." I figured, well, it'll be all right. And I went with him to the 7-Up company, which was right next door to the grocery store in Watertown, Connecticut, where I was living at the time. And he brought me into the office, pulled out an application. He said, "Fill this out." I filled it out, and he said, "Congratulations, you're hired. You work here. You start Monday." And I thought, well, that wasn't nearly as hard as I thought it was going to be. And then, alas, he said, "You will only work here 20 hours a week, but as luck would have it, I will pay you 2 times minimum wage. So you can go tell your mother you're making a weekly wage, and maybe she'll leave you be." And I did, and boy, she was aggravated with me. I always became a bit of a defense attorney when it came to figuring out what I needed to do given what she told me I had to do. And while this might well have violated the spirit of the law, it didn't violate the letter of the law. And I went to work all summer at the 7-Up company, loading and unloading trucks filled with empty cans and empty bottles and full cans. It was actually kind of miserable, but you know, when you're 16, what can you do? And that got me to thinking about the other kinds of jobs that I had. And you know, the adult me maxes out at about 5 years in any one job. I have never kept a job longer than 5 years. The younger version of me had a much quicker trigger. And for many, if not most of the jobs I had as a young man, I lasted exactly 3 days. And this began, oddly, when I went to a place called the Jackie Carroll Employment Agency, I guess it was. Again, sent by my mother. And I walked in and they handed me an application and I filled it out. And it turns out that they just take your phone number and call you whenever they get a job and you could decide to take it or not. And the very first job they called me with was for what they called light construction. And I got to the place I was supposed to be, and it was just a mess of a place in Waterbury. Crap strewn all over the place. And the guy met me and he said, "Come with me." And I went with him, and he looked at my feet, and I had a pair of sneakers on, and he said, "Where are your steel-toe boots?" I said, "What?" He said, "Your boots. You're supposed to have steel-toe boots." I said, "Jackie Carroll did not tell me this." He said, it'll be all right, which is about how they took care of legal things back when I was young. And he brought me out to the back of the site, and there was a gigantic pile of junk. I mean, it's just dreadful. He said, I need you to take all that junk in that pile and move it 8 feet over there. So I spent my entire day picking this crap up with my hands. They gave me a pair of gloves, thankfully, and heaving it 8 feet across. And by the time I was done with day 3, I had more or less moved the debris pile 8 feet. And I thought to myself, this is not how I wish to live. I don't want to have to move another debris pile next week. I'm just not going to answer the phone when Jackie Carroll calls next time. And call she did, repeatedly. And I never answered the phone. And I thought, yeah, this probably means that I'm not going to get called from Jackie Carroll anymore, which seemed about right. And I ended up getting a job at a place that I mentioned back in episode 2, I believe it was, the Farm Shop, the dreadful diner-type place that existed from Litchfield to Waterbury, for those of you who know what Connecticut looks like. For those of you who don't, trust me, it doesn't really matter. It was awful. And I took up the apron and the order pad, and I showed up for my first day, and I realized that waiting tables is god-awful. I mean, it's just terrible. And as a result of that day, I have been a chronic over-tipper of waitstaff every day since. I can't remember the last time I didn't over-tip somebody who was bringing me some food. Day 2 was so hot and the air conditioning so bad that I actually walked into the walk-in freezer between tables, and I would sit in there as long as I could. Finally, day 3, that notable third day, came along. And there was a young group, grown man and 3 teenagers, and they were sitting in my section. And I walked up and I said, "Can I help you?" And the man looked at me and he said, "You look like you're not having a great day, Jim." He read my name tag. Really pissed me off, I gotta say. Anyway, I said, no, I'm not. What can I get for you? And he said, it's okay, Jim. And I could actually feel my blood pressure rising. And finally I said, what can I get for you? And it was pretty clear by then that I just wanted to take the order. And he said, and I quote, "We love you, Jim." And that was literally all I could take. I threw my order pad into the air, and my apron went into the same direction seconds later. And I drove to Boston. Had a nice day. 3 days. Couldn't do it another minute. And which brings us back to Jackie Carroll, because the odd thing here is that she did call again, or, her duly noted representative called. And they said, would you like to go work at their Peter Paul Cadbury factory in Naugatuck, Connecticut? And until then, Naugatuck really has only made its mark by being the birthplace of Naugahyde, that thing that stands in for leather when you can't really afford leather. But lo and behold, for about 80 years, the Peter Paul Cadbury factory was the only place in the world where Mounds and Almond Joy were made. And I thought, this is going to be great. I was a big fan of Mounds and, Almond Joy to a lesser extent, but yes, that too. So I went on in, and I went and I met the person I was told to meet, and we walked into a room, at which point she looked at me and she said, "Now listen, you can't eat the candy. If we see you eating the candy, we will fire you on the spot. You cannot eat the candy." And I thought, I'm going to eat the candy. And then we walked out onto the factory floor, and she looked at me one last time and she said, "Do not eat the candy. Do not." And they were very emphatic about this. And the more times they told me not to eat the candy, the more I wanted to eat the candy. And they pointed at a company store and they said, "If you really need to eat the candy, you can buy some in here. We sell it at a very discounted rate." And I thought, screw that, I'm going to eat the candy. And that was day 1. And it was my job to flip the candies over as they came down the conveyor belt, so the top side was on top and the bottom side was on the bottom. You find that gets rather boring very quickly. Day 2, sensing my boredom, they had me moving big piles of things, not unlike the earlier Jackie Carroll experience, from one place to another, mostly boxes and the whatnot. And by the end of day 2, I had forgotten all about wanting to eat the candy. The smell after day 2 was such that I didn't want to eat the candy. Day 3, the fateful day 3. I walked in and I took a breath, and the smell of the candy made me sick to my stomach. I couldn't imagine ever wanting to eat the candy ever again. And it was probably 10 years before I would eat Mounds or Almond Joy at all, which is weird given how much I liked them before I started down this odyssey. This was a rabbit hole that I really wasn't expecting. Anyway, after day 3, I figured I'd smelled enough Mounds and Almond Joy for the rest of my life, and I'm probably still right there with that. Anyway, as it went, I was real good at having jobs for about 3 days. I've gotten to be pretty good at having jobs for about 5 years. So I guess there's something that translates there. I'm not pretending to know what it all means, nor do I really care if I ever figure out what it means. But as some of you know, I work now for the American Institute for Economic Research, and I put a lot of words together, and I'm the words guy. So if you're ever bored, we'll leave a link for you in the show note here.
We will?
Yes, we will. Why wouldn't we? Anyway, back to Peter Stokkebye and his luxury flake. The Stokkebye, it's actually pretty good, right? You can taste the Virginias. They're all the way up and down here. The Perique, not so much. It's really just a dash of Perique for condimental flavor. Not the kind of thing I would reach for, not really, but pretty good at what it's trying to be. I would give this one, I think, a solid B, and when I'm looking for a pretty straightforward Virginia flake, I'm probably going to grab this one. Not bad at all. I grabbed the little bit that I have in that same order I placed last week, where I grab all these things, 1 ounce of which, for all of the things I have yet to try. So this one's not a bad 1 ounce purchase. You can get it in up to a 1.5 pound bag. It's hard for me to imagine wanting that, but what the hell, I might just. You never know. Until next week, have a nice week. Sophia will just be quiet now. Be quiet.
Harrigan spells Harrigan. Proud of all the Irish blood that's in me.
So, the weird thing is, when I did the light construction and they harangued me for not having steel-toed work boots, I meant to go buy some steel-toed work boots, but given that I only had that job 3 days, I probably would have been underwater on that purchase for months, given that, you don't make a lot when you're working for the Jackie Carroll. And turns out when I went to the farm shop, they got on my back too, because they said, you are not wearing appropriate shoes for the farm shop. And I want you to think for a moment what that actually means. What the hell would appropriate shoes for the farm shop look like? And I never did find out. I was pretty sure I'd get a spoken to before long, but I was gone long before that was going to happen. And then finally, at the Mounds factory, as it's come to be known in my mind, I got yelled at there too. Why? You guessed it, steel-toed work boots, not on my feet. And again, it didn't really matter, given that day 3 came and went so quickly. And I guess that I've probably not had appropriate footwear for any job that I've ever had. I still have both feet. Can't be that bad. See you next week.